And here we go. We are live. TMJ4.com, TMJ4 News, TMJ4 Sports, all that good fun stuff. Delaney Brey along with Lance Al. Got to get all the plugs in, Delaney. You know how it goes. You get everything in there, whatever. We're going to talk Packers today after that 23-7 dismal loss to start the season. Delaney and I are in different parts of the palatial TMJ4 studios. She is in the sports office. I am, Delaney, maybe about 50 feet away out in the newsroom. But hey, we're in different locations. It's all good, you know?
Lance, I'm just glad you made it back safe. I'm just glad you made it back safe after that loss.
I'm glad I'm back too. Jeremy Dunk, our trustworthy photojournalist, he was moving a little slow this morning, so I'll throw him under the bus a little bit. And then there's that detour, like out in Pewaukee. Like you got to get off the highway, and it's legit traffic. It's kind of crazy, right now. So, but let's get on and move on with the game. And Delaney, your thoughts in general. We're going to definitely take questions and things like that. And we've got Brian Tesmer, who's chiming in saying, I'm not overly worried yet. So maybe we can start there. Delaney, just address what Brian's talking about. Are you not worried, mildly worried, very worried after week one and what you saw?
I'm mildly worried. What we saw from the offense and from the offensive line, and I think that's mainly where my worry is. I believe that Aaron Rodgers can whip these receivers into shape. Again, this was Christian Watson's first NFL game. You know that environment in Minneapolis is not an easy place to play. It is loud in that stadium, so I can understand with there being jitters. I think the offense can get going. I think they can fix things, but it's that offensive line that I'm really, really worried about because you could just tell Rodgers was not used to being pressured the way he was pressured Sunday night, and it got to him. He even admitted that there were a couple of throws, a couple of reads that were his fault. He threw the ball away, and I think that's a part of him just not having the time that he's accustomed to in order to, kind of assess the situation and pick the best play.
So, and that's a great point, Delaney, because from all indications, week 2 against the Bears Sunday night, right here on TMJ4, obviously at 7:20, we will not see David Bakhtiari. We will not see Elton Jenkins. They kind of came out and said they won't play in the first 2 weeks. So, and you've got John Runyon, who's in the concussion protocol. So
Yes.
You don't know of his status. So you're right, Delaney, that the self-improvement or the improvement's got to come from within, at least for the time being, or at least for one more game until you can get help. So that to me was I don't know if it was a shocking thing, and I know that the offensive line wasn't unbelievable in the preseason, but I thought they would be at least a little bit better than that. Za'Darius Smith definitely played like a man who had revenge on his mind, and no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And then maybe I'll lead you into the next point or topic that kind of goes in with the offensive line, but it also goes in with the offensive game plan is, I know you're as big of a Aaron Jones fan as anybody, but 8 touches is definitely not enough. And even A.J. Dillon, I feel like got enough touches, even though he did kind of see a little more action, and I think he led the team with 5 catches. So were you a little bit shocked, as I was, that Aaron Jones, I think we're going to see plenty more of him against the Bears, but that he only got 8 touches, and that they did to take pressure off of Rodgers, that they didn't throw to the running backs more often, or didn't, obviously put them on wheel routes or screen pass, whatever, to get things kind of going, especially with the chemistry of the receivers kind of being still a work in progress.
Yes and no. Yes, surprised in the fact that what you're saying, I didn't think the offensive line was great during the preseason, but I thought they were at a better starting point than we saw week 1 against the Vikings. And maybe that goes to show that while, yes, the preseason is not the regular season, and we like to say, hey, they're all NFL players at the end of the day, but obviously there's a huge disconnect. Because if you've got Aaron Rodgers behind you, if your O-line is able to protect someone like Jordan Love, you should be able to protect somebody like Aaron Rodgers. So maybe this goes to show you that there's a reason the stars don't want to play in the preseason, because the preseason truly is different when it comes to levels to this. Because it was black and white. It was night and day from what we saw in the preseason to what we saw in week 1. So that surprised me. I thought the offensive line was in a better situation than it was without David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins. No, not surprised, because I was saying this during training camp and watching the guys during practices that were available to us, that if the offensive line did struggle, you are going to have Aaron Jones block. Aaron Jones is a very good blocker, and I hate to throw A.J. Dillon under the bus, but I think we've got a couple of plays that we could replay where A.J. just got completely rolled over by an offensive lineman. But Jones knows how to block. He can do that. So I expected if something happened, if someone broke free, Mr. Reed, that Aaron Jones has no problem taking over the block, and that's going to be his first reaction. He's not going to care about, running his route to get a catch. He's going to be worried about, oh, I need to, buy some more time for Rodgers to find somebody else. So no, not surprised in that aspect. And you're right, A.J. Dillon was the leading receiver in this one, and ultimately the only guy who was able to rush in a touchdown there. So it's tough. It's tough. You see what they're doing. I think maybe Tunyon's going to have to do a little more blocking. We know that's what Mercedes was doing all night long. That's why they didn't try anything with Big Dog, with Big Man. So it's kind of sad. It's because you see the problems and you know how to fix it, but we don't have the availability to fix it at this time.
So once again, we will solicit your questions, however crazy, however good, however speculative they may be. We will solicit your questions, and we had a good one from Brian earlier. And the other thing, Delaney, is I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer on this one, but I know the topic has come up to me repeatedly, and I'm on the sidelines for the preseason, things like that, is, okay, should the starters have played even a little bit? And I'm not going to sit and defend Matt LaFleur in any way, shape, or form. I can see both sides of it. Part of me says, hey, the specter of Jordy Nelson, tearing his ACL in Pittsburgh, and I was there for that game, and losing a key starter in a preseason game is a big blow. There's no, and you get second guess to the heaven. What was he doing out there? Why was he even out there? At least if it was in a game that meant something toward your record, whatever. But in the same sense, you had Aaron Rodgers still trying to develop chemistry with new receivers, whether it was Sammy Watkins, the veteran, or whether it was with rookies, Dobbs and Watson, and certain parts of the offense that were kind of in flux that maybe a few series or maybe a little bit of action would have helped. So what side are you kind of on? And then I know there's a question from Frank Cosentino, our good friend. We'll take his question in just a second, but maybe just chime in on what you think. Delaney.
So, do I think Aaron Rodgers needs to play in the preseason? No matter what. New receivers, old receivers, veterans, guys he's been with, for years. I don't think he needs to play in the preseason. I think Christian Watson should have taken a couple of snaps. I think if he was available to play that final week, that he should have. I think if you could have thrown Sammy out there a couple of more times just to see what he had available. I think you needed to use the preseason to play with your receivers, not so much Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to see what's going on the field and say, okay, well, I like the way Sammy ran that route, or I like the way Christian ran that in that situation. Hey, I saw him, change and maneuver and adjust during that. He's able to do all that from the sideline. He's able to do that in all film, put it in his brain, and then learn when something like that happens, how each receiver is going to react. So I think they needed to play around with the receivers more. I think they needed to be more experimental. I think they maybe even needed to throw them into tricky situations where they had to figure a way to, to get open. I think they needed to do that a lot more, because we saw, and Rodgers kind of alluded to it himself in the post game, that, there were times where he could see the adjustment he was expecting, and the receivers didn't make it.
Good point. All right. So I know Frank Cosentino had a question, a comment, or a concern. So our host DJ will put that up on the screen and I can read that. Frank says, my panic is when Frank's a good friend of mine, Delaney, and a fellow wrestling fan, and he knows that I like to do the old man workouts, which is like basically just a lot of arm curls, so that way you look good in the shirt and all that good fun stuff. Delaney, for me long enough that this conversation is going to go sideways at some point, so that's good stuff. Douglas Winslow says, we've seen this movie before, except this time 12 won't get the MVP, and you'll still lose in the playoffs. Now, that's an interesting take. Now, okay, once again, I will pose the question to you, Delaney. I don't mean to keep putting you on the spot, but I'll just kind of play the devil's advocate of each side.
Hey, you worked hard having to watch that in real time.
Yeah. So we've also seen, not to criticize Douglas's question, but we've also seen where last year they lost 38-3, and I mentioned it in our coverage last night. Second year in a row, one score. Whether it's a touchdown this year or a field goal last year, just one score. Okay, so last year they got schooled, and they still came back and won 13 games. And yes, they had another painful playoff flameout, but they still recovered extremely well, won the North Division, and it didn't really affect them that greatly, just getting schooled in game one. But there, and Matt LaFleur will never come out and say it, but the reason why you don't play your starters in the preseason, at least according to him, is that he wants them for when the games count, the regular season, and if and there is some thought, Delaney, that you want to be playing your best football in week 10, week 12, week 17, whatever it is, as opposed to week 1. People forget about that anyway. So there is that school of thought. But the other school of thought is, yes, we have seen this before. Aaron Rodgers, we don't know at this point. It's week 1, but he may not play at an MVP level. And the receivers, it's going to take some time and maybe whatever. But you would think the defense would play better. Your thoughts on kind of that spectrum as well?
I agree because they don't have Devontae Adams. I agree because this is a new offense when it comes to its core. You might be thinking, well, you've got Cobb, you've got Jones, you got AJ, you got Tunyon. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, if we went back and watched all of the tape, the offense revolved around the pass game, around Devontae Adams, around a slot. And you don't have that right now. You may have it in week 10, and if they have it in week 10, great. Maybe that's soon enough to be able to make a playoff run because we've got an extra week now, because there's different things with the playoffs, but I don't see I guess now 14 and 3. I don't see 14 and 3 happening. And I think we may be lucky at looking at week 1 for it to be a 50 and 50 record.
So Jim Earhart, I believe it is, says Aaron should have gotten out while he could have. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of years before they have a Super Bowl quality team, which is kind of an interesting take as well. So let me kind of spin it into a question, Delaney. Is did the mediocre defensive performance shock you? I think there were guys that had good performances yesterday. Kenny Clark was pressuring Cousins. Rashawn Gary had a sack. I think Quay Walker, before he hurt his shoulder, showed why they drafted him in the first round, and he was very active, very sure tackler, great in pursuit, things like that. Preston Smith had some pressures as well. But did it surprise you about the defense yesterday? And did it also shock you that, okay, in the offseason, correct me if I'm wrong, you paid Jair Alexander all that money, and you paid him to be an elite cover cornerback, and he rarely ever covered Justin Jefferson yesterday. It was mainly Eric Stokes who didn't do as well, and Jair Alexander in the locker room was just kind of like, zip my lips. I'm not going to talk about the game plan, but you would think that you would want your prime defensive back on him at some point, don't you think?
Okay, you were for me, so I got a little bit of that. I think
And I believe we have lost Delaney on the feed. I apologize for that. She had said that.
Are you still on?
I'm still on, Delaney, if you want to just come and talk over my shoulder. So I'm going to get out of the chair, and I'm going to have Delaney finish her point, because apparently her feed.
I love it. We have internet problems in our own building. It's a Monday. It's a Monday, guys. No, you were breaking up when you were kind of posing the question to me, but I think I got the gist of it. What was
shocking about the defense, and then shocking that Jair Alexander didn't cover Justin Jefferson much, if at all.
So that would be something I'd be curious to talk with Jair about, because he's so confident.
Mm-hmm.
You know that he wants to be on someone like Justin Jefferson all day long, all 4 quarters. I'm curious if, they come out in the first half and they were doing whatever they were doing as far as their game plan was for defense. I'm curious if there was a conversation where Jair was like, put me on this guy, because again, sitting on the couch watching the game like all of you were, it kind of looked like they had just been like, okay, if they're going to beat us with Jefferson, then they beat us with Jefferson. We're going to worry about other things. And that obviously didn't work, because Jefferson was very available to beat them.
And if I can interject, and I'll pop into the shot here. So, that one play where Justin Jefferson caught the ball going across the middle, and literally when he turned around, it was almost like he stumbled or didn't know what to do, because he was so wide open.
Yeah.
Seriously, like he was like, there's nobody within. But I mean, it's crazy. So it to me, that was kind of a puzzling, crazy thing.
Yeah, and I got to hand it to Za'Darius too when it comes to the Vikings defense. The Vikings defense was very ready, and I know that
fed off his energy.
Yes,
yeah.
And I know that we've had some comments. I kind of put it out there on Twitter. I was like, it's kind of sad. It's week 1, and the Packers look like they already need a bye, because everybody that they lost on the defense, that was shocking.
Yeah.
That more so than the defensive play, it was shocking that so many guys went down, because I think the Packers have always prided themselves on beating